I always believed my parents had my back. That's what you're supposed to think, right? That no matter how messy life gets, family is your anchor. But if there's anything I've learned by 42, it's this. Sometimes, the people who raise you are also the ones who quietly bury your future. Growing up in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, I was the quiet daughter, bookish, responsible, the one who never asked for much. My younger sister, Brooke, on the other hand, was the golden one. Outspoken, charismatic, always the center of attention. When she stumbled, my parents caught her. When I succeeded, they nodded and moved on. I never complained. Not when I worked full-time during college while Brooke found herself in Europe. Not when I paid off my student loans alone while they co-signed her third car. Not even when she moved into a 3-bedroom townhouse at 26, fully furnished by my parents, while I was still splitting rent in a studio apartment with a leaky pipe. But what I couldn't swallow, what I still choke on, was the betrayal that came quietly, cloaked in smiles and signatures. When I was 28, I got a decent inheritance from my grandmother. Nothing life-changing, but enough to make a plan. Invest it wisely, maybe buy a condo in a few years. My father, who had always handled the family finances, suggested putting it into a family trust temporarily. "We'll help it grow," he said. "It's still yours. It'll be waiting when you're ready." I believed him. 14 years passed. I kept working. I rented. I saved what I could. I never touched that money because I assumed it was being invested for me. I even bragged about it once, to Brooke, of all people, saying I'd use it to finally get a place of my own. She gave me a strange look, but said nothing. The truth came out last Thanksgiving. It wasn't even a fight. It was a passing comment from my mother over coffee and pumpkin pie. She sighed. "Thank God we were able to help Brooke keep the house when she lost her job last year. That mortgage would have drowned her if we hadn't had your fund." I blinked. "My fund?" She froze, looked at my father, and then everything unraveled. They didn't even deny it. "We had to make a choice," my father said, like he was explaining the weather. "Brooke needed it more. You're single, you rent, you're fine." I wasn't fine. I felt like a stranger at the table, like a fool. 14 years of discipline, of blind trust, all for nothing. And when I asked them how they could do that without telling me, my mother shrugged and said, "You've always been so dramatic, Claire. You wouldn't have understood. You're nothing more than a spoiled child sometimes." Spoiled. That word echoed in my head long after I left their house. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop, poured a glass of wine, and made a list. At the top, call the attorney. The lawyer's name was Martin Kessler. I found him on a recommendation form. Quiet, precise, not flashy. A man who spoke in facts and knew how to listen. When I explained everything over the phone, I expected hesitation. Maybe even doubt. Instead, after a pause, he said, "This isn't the first time I've seen something like this. Can you come into the office next week?" It was oddly comforting to hear that I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't normal, but it also wasn't unheard of. He asked for documents, anything I could find with signatures, account numbers, proof of the trust. That night, I dug through my files like a woman possessed. I found the original trust agreement. I remembered how proud my father was when he showed it to me back in 2010. "This is how grown-ups build wealth," he'd said. The papers had both our names, mine as the beneficiary, his as trustee. It was all legal, and it was supposed to be mine. As I scanned the pages, bitterness crawled up my throat. It wasn't just the money, it was the lie, stretched over years, wrapped in smiles and Sunday phone calls. All those times they reassured me they were looking out for my future. All those times I held off on buying, on living, because I believed them. Brooke, of course, knew. She must have. That's what kept gnawing at me. The look she gave me when I mentioned the fund. It hadn't been confusion. It had been guilt. Or worse, smugness. I couldn't stop replaying that moment, her sipping from a wine glass and giving me that tight-lipped smile. Growing up, Brooke was always the star. She had that kind of careless charm that people mistake for depth. Our parents adored her. When she failed out of college her sophomore year, they paid for a semester abroad instead of holding her accountable. When she totaled her second car texting at a red light, they blamed the dealership for not recommending a safer model. Meanwhile, I worked. I graduated with honors. I got a job in nonprofit logistics, low-paying but meaningful, and they said I should aim higher. I never resented Brooke. I just assumed she needed more help, that I was the stable one, the one who could figure it out alone. But now I saw the pattern for what it was. They didn't expect more from me. They valued me less. At the meeting with Martin, he laid it out simply. Your parents were legally bound to act in your best interest as trustees. If they diverted those funds without your permission, that's a breach of fiduciary duty. He looked up from the documents. Depending on the amount and how it was moved, you might have grounds for civil litigation, possibly even fraud. Fraud. That word felt foreign, heavy. This wasn't just family drama. It was something darker, something real. Still, I hesitated. Could I really sue my own parents? Martin didn't pressure me. He told me to take time. But don't wait too long, he warned. Once we know where the money went, if it's been mingled with other assets, recovering it gets messy. I left his office shaking, not from fear, anger. Sharp, focused, like a rope that had finally snapped after years of pulling tight. I had been patient, forgiving, reasonable. But they had crossed a line. I went home, made tea, and opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't making a list. I was sending an email to Brooke. I didn't sleep the night I sent the email. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how she'd respond, if she'd respond at all. I didn't write much. Just enough to make it clear I knew. Asterisk Brooke, we need to talk. I know about the trust. I know where the money went. Don't insult me with silence or excuses. I deserve the truth. I'm giving you a chance to say something before this goes further. Claire Asterisk. She replied the next afternoon. A single line. Let's not turn this into a war, Claire. A war? She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She minimized it, like I was some overreacting nuisance trying to stir trouble. That line hit harder than I expected. It told me everything I needed to know. I tried to remember the last time Brooke and I had a real, honest conversation. Not small talk at holidays or birthday texts. Something real. Maybe high school? Maybe never. Growing up, we weren't enemies. But we were never close. Brooke was the kind of sibling who borrowed clothes without asking and returned them stained. Who would cut you off mid-sentence at the dinner table and be praised for confidence. Our parents reinforced it. Every time I tried to set boundaries, I was overreacting. Every time Brooke crossed a line, she was just being Brooke. Still, I had held on to some fantasy that deep down, she cared. That she respected me, even if she didn't say it. But that email shattered it. Later that week, I went to my parents' house. I didn't call first. I knew they wouldn't answer if they saw my name. My father opened the door wearing one of his weekend cardigans, the kind he used to wear to church. His face fell when he saw me. I don't want to argue, he said before I even stepped inside. I'm not here to argue, I replied. I'm here to give you one last chance to explain, not to defend yourselves, just to be honest. My mother stood by the kitchen, arms crossed. She didn't say a word. I laid the trust documents on the table. I spoke to a lawyer, I said. He's already reviewing this. You took what wasn't yours. You lied to me. And I need to know, was this just Brooke's mortgage, or is there more? My father didn't flinch. We used what we thought was best for the family. You've always had a roof over your head. You've always been independent. Brooke needed support. You know how hard it was for her when she got laid off. This wasn't your money to spend, I snapped. You were the trustees, not the owners. You had a legal duty. Finally, my mother spoke. We didn't think you'd ever need it. You've done fine on your own. We just wanted to help Brooke get back on her feet. We thought you'd understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You never believed I needed help because you never really saw me. You saw what you wanted to see. The silence that followed was cold and thick. They didn't apologize. They didn't ask what I planned to do next. They just stood there, defensive and hollow. I walked out of the house knowing something I hadn't known before. I was done asking for recognition. I didn't need their approval. I needed justice. The next day, I called Martin. "I'm ready," I told him. He didn't ask what had changed. He simply said, "Then let's begin." Claire confronted Brooke through email, receiving only a cold and defensive reply. This confirmed Brooke's awareness and lack of remorse. Claire then visited her parents unannounced and directly confronted them with legal documentation and accusations. They didn't deny their actions, offering instead weak justifications, that Claire was doing fine and that Brooke needed it more. Their lack of apology sealed Claire's resolve. She told her lawyer, Martin Kessler, that she was ready to proceed with legal action. Story: Martin moved quickly. Within a week, he drafted the first letter. Formal notification to my parents, stating that I intended to take legal action for breach of fiduciary duty and misappropriation of trust funds. It was written in cool, clipped legal language. No emotion, no judgment. Just facts. He copied Brooke on the letter, too. I knew they'd be furious. The fallout began 3 days after the letter was delivered. I got a voicemail from my father, shaky voice, forced calm. "Claire, let's not blow this out of proportion. We're family. This isn't something that needs to be taken to court." I didn't call back. Then came my mother's message, more clipped, less regretful. "I just don't understand how you could do this to us after everything we've done for you. Do you want to ruin our reputation? Embarrass us in front of everyone we know?" That last part told me more than anything else. They weren't scared of losing a case. They were scared of being seen for what they had done. Brooke, of course, didn't call. She sent a single text. "This is cruel, Claire. You could destroy everything." I stared at it for a long time. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Let's talk." Just blame. At work, I tried to keep my head down, but I wasn't the same. My assistant, Erin, noticed first. "You okay?" she asked after a meeting where I barely spoke. "I'm just dealing with some family issues," I said, and left it there. Truthfully, I was unraveling inside. Not because I doubted my actions, I didn't, but because the reality of going to war with your own blood is heavier than anyone prepares you for. Every document Martin sent, every call, every reference to the plaintiff and the defendants made it harder to believe these were the people who once tucked me in at night. The hardest part wasn't the money. It was remembering that I had sat across from them for decades, telling them about my life, my struggles, my dreams, and they had looked me in the eye and lied. The legal process moved into discovery. Martin filed subpoenas for bank records, tracing the transfer of funds from the trust into my parents' accounts and then into Brooke's. We also requested communication records, emails, texts, anything that could show intent or premeditation. I knew the case was solid, but that didn't make it easier when I received a letter in the mail a few days later. Not an email, a real letter in my mother's handwriting. Asterisk Claire, I don't know what happened to the sweet girl I raised, the one who always tried to do what was right. This isn't who you are. You're letting bitterness consume you. If you go through with this, you'll tear this family apart. And for what? A number in a bank account? Money isn't everything. Family is. Please think about that before it's too late. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it up and slid it into a drawer, next to the trust agreement they had signed in 2010. They made this bed. I was done sleeping on the floor. Discovery didn't just confirm what I suspected, it exposed more than I could have imagined. Martin called me in for a meeting 2 weeks later, his face unusually tense. "We got access to the full transfer trail," he said. "Your trust was drained across 5 different transactions over the span of 2 years. The last one occurred just 10 months ago." 10 months ago? I blinked. But they told me Brooke lost her job last year. Martin nodded. That's the thing. According to the documents, these funds weren't just used to cover the mortgage. They were used to pay off credit card debt, a landscaping renovation, and... He slid the paper toward me. A luxury trip to the Cayman Islands. All charged to a card registered to Brooke's name, but paid directly from the trust-linked account. I stared at the printout. Plane tickets, spa packages, private boat charter. I felt something inside me rupture. I hadn't cried through any of this, but something about seeing Cayman jet ski rentals, $460 in black and white, made my throat close up. "They used my future as a slush fund," I said quietly. Martin didn't respond. He didn't need to. Over the next week, I withdrew a little from the world. I did the bare minimum at work, dodging after-hours calls and Friday drinks. I ignored texts from acquaintances and turned down invites from friends. I wasn't embarrassed, I just didn't know how to explain it. Who wants to admit they're suing their own parents and sister over stolen inheritance? But the loneliness seeped in. One night, I broke and called my old college friend, Lena. We hadn't spoken in months, but she picked up on the first ring. When I finally told her everything, every gut-punch detail, there was a long silence. Then she said, "Claire, I'm so sorry, and I believe you. But I have to ask, why now? Why not just walk away?" That question pierced me, not because it was unfair, but because it was what I used to ask myself before I learned the truth. Because I built my entire life on the idea that they were helping me in the background, I said. I waited, I trusted, and while I was counting pennies, they were drinking cocktails in the Caribbean with my name on the receipt. She didn't interrupt. She let me sit in it. That, more than anything, made me feel seen. A few days later, Martin informed me that Brooke had hired her own lawyer, and they weren't interested in settlement. They were preparing for mediation, but the tone was aggressive. Apparently, Brooke's legal counsel was trying to spin the case as a family misunderstanding and not fraud. "They're preparing to paint you as vengeful," Martin warned, "and your parents will likely support that narrative." I was prepared for it. What I wasn't prepared for was what happened next. I received a message from an unknown number. Just 6 words. I know what Brooke did too. I stared at it for a long time. There was no name, no follow-up, just a hint, a crack. Something, or someone, wasn't aligning with their story. The message haunted me for days. I showed it to Martin first. His reaction was cautious. "Could be someone from the inside," he said. "Or a bluff. People like to feel important during conflict." Still, something about the phrasing stuck with me. I know what Brooke did too. Not what your parents did. Not what they did to you. It was personal. Targeted. I replied to the number. "Who is this? What do you know?" No answer. 3 days later, I got another message. This time with a name. "It's Natalie. I used to date her ex. Meet me." I sat with that for a minute. Natalie. The name was vaguely familiar. Then it clicked. Brooke's ex-boyfriend Tom had dated someone named Natalie after they broke up. Brooke hated her, claimed she was a leech and a stalker. But I remembered now. Natalie had been at a Christmas party once. Quiet, polite, barely spoke. I agreed to meet her. A small cafe near downtown. Neutral ground. Natalie was already sitting when I arrived, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. She looked up at me, nervous. "Thank you for coming," she said quickly. I nodded. "You said you knew something." She exhaled hard. "I wasn't going to get involved, but I saw your name mentioned in a message Brooke sent Tom a while back. She was bragging about how your parents let her borrow your trust fund, said you'd never know, called it an upgrade fee for the better daughter." I felt my stomach twist. "She sent it in a moment of spite," Natalie continued. "They were fighting. He showed it to me later, when we were still close. He thought it was gross, said she laughed about it after, like it was a joke." "Do you still have the message?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Natalie hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I saved a screenshot before I blocked her. I knew something like this would happen someday." The image was blurry, but clear enough to read. Honestly, if Claire ever finds out, let her cry about it. I earned that money just by being born better. LOL. I swallowed hard. "Would you be willing to sign a statement?" Natalie didn't even pause. "Yes." Martin was thrilled. "It's not a smoking gun, but it's damn close. It shows intent, mockery, and it kills any misunderstanding defense they were building." Brooke's legal team responded to the news by immediately requesting private mediation. They were losing confidence, but that came with a warning. "Now that they know you've got a witness," Martin said, "they might go public, spin it, make you look like a vulture picking apart a family for cash." I knew he was right, and I was ready for it. But what I wasn't ready for was what happened next. Someone posted about me, by name, on a local gossip forum. A thread titled, "Cold-hearted woman sues her parents for $. Who does that?" The post included vague details that only someone close to the case could have known. And a comment underneath said, "She always thought she was better than her sister. Guess this proves it." The post spread faster than I expected. Within hours, someone from work sent me a screenshot with a hesitant message. "Hey Claire, is this about you? If you don't want to talk about it, totally understand." I stared at the screen, feeling the slow burn of humiliation rise in my chest. The post didn't mention specifics, no dollar amounts, no case numbers, but it had just enough detail to be damaging. And the comments were worse. Dozens of strangers calling me entitled, ungrateful, even heartless. It didn't matter that they didn't know the truth. In their minds, I was a villain suing the very people who raised me. No one mentioned betrayal, or theft, or 14 years of silence. At the office, the whispers started. I could feel them, even if no one said it out loud. Meetings grew more awkward. People hesitated around me. My manager, Kim, finally pulled me aside. "I don't want to get into your personal business," she said gently, "but if there's anything you need, time off, flexible schedule, just let me know." I nodded, grateful but hollow. "Thank you, I'm managing." But I wasn't. Not really. Not when every moment outside of work was filled with lawyer calls, court filings, or online damage control. Martin advised me to stay quiet publicly, at least until mediation. "They're baiting you," he warned. "If you speak out now, it could be spun against you. Let them make the noise." So I did nothing. And silence, I learned, sometimes feels worse than the attack. Lena came over that weekend with wine and takeout. She handed me a bag of Thai food and said, "No pity, no advice, just carbs and company." We sat in silence for a while before she asked, "Do you think it was Brooke who posted it?" I didn't even hesitate. If not her, then someone she fed the story to. Brooke had always known how to manipulate the narrative. As kids, she could break a vase and somehow get me grounded. As adults, she weaponized charm, especially when she needed sympathy. Martin confirmed it the next day. "We traced the IP. It came from a marketing agency Brooke used last year for freelance work. It's not ironclad proof, but enough to mention in mediation. It shows intent to smear." He slid a new document toward me. "They're requesting pre-mediation terms. You need to see this. The offer was insulting. A small payout, barely a fraction of what was taken, in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and full dismissal of all claims. No admission of wrongdoing, no apology, and a clause that prohibited me from ever discussing the case publicly or privately again." I stared at the paper in disbelief. "They're not taking this seriously," I said. "They're testing you," Martin replied. "They think you're exhausted, that you'll fold." They weren't wrong. I was exhausted. But folding would mean letting them rewrite the story. Again. And I'd had enough of that. I told Martin to reject the offer. No NDA, no silence. Not this time. But as I hung up, my phone buzzed with a new message. From a number I didn't recognize. "If you go through with this, you'll regret it. You don't know everything that's been hidden from you. This wasn't just guilt or manipulation anymore. This was a threat." I stared at the message for a long time. Not because I was afraid of what it meant, but because part of me already suspected there was more. I forwarded it to Martin immediately. He brought in a digital forensics contact to trace it. "We'll know soon," he promised, but I could hear the tension in his voice. This wasn't just a legal case anymore. It was becoming something personal. Feral. The next morning, I woke up to a new email in my inbox. No sender name, just a subject line. "You deserve to know the truth." Inside was a single attachment, a scanned document, slightly tilted, like it had been hurriedly photographed. It was a financial agreement, a quiet addendum to the trust paperwork, dated 2 years after the original trust was established. And it had one disturbing sentence circled in red. "All funds may be withdrawn or reallocated at the trustee's discretion if done for the benefit of a dependent family member." It looked legitimate, same notary stamp, same letterhead. But there was one problem. I never signed off on it. My name wasn't even mentioned. Martin reviewed it and went pale. "If this is real," he said, "they're going to argue that they had legal grounds. that the trust was amended to protect a dependent, Brooke. It weakens our fraud argument. I pushed the paper back across the table. So we're supposed to believe I just agreed to let my inheritance become Brooke's safety net? Martin frowned. We need to verify if that document was legally filed. If it wasn't, then someone forged it. And that's when something inside me shifted. Not fear, not doubt, but rage. Quiet, concentrated rage. I went digging, through old emails, correspondence, even paperwork from my bank. And I found something, a PDF statement from 3 years ago, addressed to me, that showed a freeze on the trust account, with no explanation. I had dismissed it at the time, thinking it was routine or irrelevant. I never froze the account, and I never got follow-up. Martin's investigator pulled court records and confirmed it. No legal amendment to the trust had ever been formally filed, which meant one of two things. Either the document was a private agreement never disclosed to me, or it was falsified to cover the theft. But that wasn't the worst part. The forensics expert traced the threatening text and the anonymous email to the same IP address, registered to my parents' Wi-Fi. Martin looked at me, expression grim. It came from inside their house, Claire. Probably your mother's device. It took everything in me not to fall apart in his office. They threatened me. From the same place they taught me how to read, I whispered. I went home and stood in my kitchen for what felt like hours. I made tea I never drank. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator. The quiet, once comforting, now felt like it was mocking me. That night, I didn't sleep. I drafted a victim impact statement instead. Something Martin said might help in mediation. Not just legal damages, emotional ones, the betrayal, the isolation, the weaponizing of love. I ended it with one sentence. What they stole wasn't just money. It was the illusion that I ever mattered to them as much as she did. The mediation was scheduled for a Friday. Neutral location, high-rise building downtown. The kind with tinted windows and beige conference rooms that feel like they were designed to hold uncomfortable truths. I arrived early. Martin was already there, going over our final documentation. Natalie would be on standby by phone. Her statement, signed and notarized, sat on top of the binder like a loaded weapon. They'll try to play calm, Martin said. Professional. Don't let it fool you. They're panicked. That's why they're here. The door opened, and my parents walked in first. My mother wore a deep blue blouse I recognized from holidays. My father had his usual stiff posture, hands folded behind his back like a man attending a funeral. Brooke came in last, eyes darting to mine and then away, like she couldn't decide if she was still the favorite child or just exposed. The mediator, a thin woman named Karen, began with a polite summary of the case. I barely heard it. I was watching their faces, watching for any flicker of shame. There wasn't any. Martin laid out our position methodically. Misappropriation of trust funds, breach of fiduciary duty, harassment, attempted intimidation, forgery, or at minimum, willful concealment of a false document. Then he read my victim impact statement aloud. There was a moment after he finished where no one moved. Even Karen sat still. Then Brooke scoffed. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Claire always thought she was better than everyone. Now she wants to play victim because life didn't go her way." I didn't even flinch. I looked straight at her. "I never thought I was better. I just thought I mattered too." My mother spoke next. "We did what we thought was right. Brooke needed support. You never asked for help." "Because you trained me not to," I said. "You praised me for not needing you. You punished me with silence and called it independence." Martin slid the fraudulent amendment forward. "Can you explain this?" he asked. My father's jaw twitched. My mother glanced at Brooke. Brooke's lawyer interrupted. "We're not prepared to confirm the validity of that document today." "Of course you're not," Martin replied. Karen called for a break. As the others stepped out, Brooke lingered. "You really want to drag this through court? Embarrass everyone?" "You already embarrassed yourself," I said quietly. "All I did was shine a light on it." She leaned in, venom in her voice. "Do you think they'll forgive you for this?" I didn't answer, because for the first time, I no longer needed their forgiveness. When we returned to the room, Karen looked exhausted. "Given the circumstances," she said, "and the evidence presented, I strongly advise all parties to consider settlement terms with transparency and restitution. Martin offered final terms: full repayment of the original trust, legal fees covered, and an official written statement acknowledging wrongdoing, but no NDA. I wanted the truth, not silence. There was hesitation, a whispered argument on their side of the table. Then my father, for the first time, looked directly at me, and in a low voice he said, "We'll agree." Even Karen looked stunned. Brooke looked betrayed. My mother looked hollow. It wasn't justice, not in the perfect sense. But it was truth, on paper, real. A line in history that said, "This happened." And it mattered. But as we signed the preliminary agreement, Martin whispered, "We'll need to talk later. Something came up with the investigation. There's more." More? I thought I had already lost everything there was to lose. We sat across from each other in Martin's office again. The sun had already set. My signature still felt fresh on the mediation paperwork, but I could sense it. Something was still hanging in the air. Martin closed the blinds before he spoke. "I waited until mediation concluded to show you this. I didn't want it to derail things." He placed a slim folder on the table between us. 3 years ago, your parents refinanced their home," he said. "They did it using a second mortgage, secured using the trust's projected value as collateral. And when the bank needed assurance of permission, they submitted a notarized letter, allegedly signed by you." I felt my breath hitch. Martin opened the folder. There it was, a letter with my name printed neatly at the bottom and a signature that looked almost, but not quite, like mine. My stomach twisted. "That's not mine," I whispered. "I never signed anything like this. I never knew they even refinanced." Martin nodded grimly. "We verified it with a handwriting analyst. It's a forgery, almost certainly your mother's." The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was a kind of numbness. The betrayal had passed the point of sharpness. Now it was dull, heavy, bone deep. "They risked their house," I said quietly. "They gambled it all, and used my name to do it." Martin leaned forward. "We can pursue criminal charges if you want. Forgery is a felony. We have enough." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what justice even looked like anymore. I had won the legal battle. The money would be returned. My name had been cleared. But my family? What was left of it? That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the framed photo I hadn't taken down. Me at 8, Brooke at 6, both of us grinning, clutching snow cones in front of our parents' house. Back when I thought love was a given. Back when trust wasn't something you had to double-check. I didn't press charges, not because they didn't deserve it, but because I couldn't carry it any further. I had carried enough. I wanted to move forward. I wanted peace. Weeks passed. The story faded offline. The gossip forums found someone new to rip apart. I returned to work. People stopped whispering. I even saw Brooke once, from across a grocery store aisle. She turned the corner before I could react. My parents never called, not even after the final payment cleared. But Lena showed up one Saturday with paint samples and said, "If you're finally going to buy your own place, it better not have beige walls." We laughed, and then I cried. Not the kind of tears that come from sadness, but from release. From finally choosing my own life without asking permission. In the end, I didn't just win a case. I reclaimed my voice, the one they'd taught me to silence. I built a boundary no one was going to cross again, no matter how familiar their footsteps sounded on the porch. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had come home.